Hey everybody, time for another Blu-ray DVD or DVD Blu-ray update video. So with that said, we got a lot to cover, so let's just get to it. And if you like what you see here, click the subscribe button for more. Okay, so first, yeah, I think we all know this one, so I'm not going to go too much into it. One of the better Will Ferrell comedies that actually manages to get a laugh out of you. It's a very relatable situation. Two grown men have parents who they get married and then they become stepbrothers. But they don't really like each other at first, and then all of a sudden, like, we should make a bunk bed, and then everybody starts like, it's a very relatable situation. I personally prefer this more than The Hangover, even though The Hangover is a good movie too. Beowulf. Okay. The original story of Beowulf, nobody knows who actually wrote it. Nobody really knows. But this has been the only film version that I can think of about the story of Beowulf. And it's a very folk kind of legend, so of course, I mean, it's a folk tale basically. It's a folk tale with some kind of a point to make. I guess if you want to call it that. But yeah, this is another one of those movies, much like The Polar Express, where it's one of those motion capture kind of movies, and they never seem to work. Motion capture doesn't work for a number of reasons, and I don't know why people keep using them. But this was one of the first ones outside of Monster House. This one was okay. I think I like this a little better, but the motion capture on here is a little better than in Polar Express to me. But again, we have an issue where people like to use it, and I'm not really a fan of it. So, not really a fan of motion capture, but the movie's decent. Iron Man 3. Again, trying to get all the MCU movies, but I don't know. Iron Man 3, yeah, the only thing I remember about this movie was Ben Kingsley in this role in which the trailers made him look at. The trailers made it seem like he was going to be the villain, when in fact he was kind of a pushover. Kind of underwhelming, but again, I haven't seen this in a long time, so I do not remember. Alright, next, the John Wick collection. So this has all three John Wick movies, and the first one was good, I want to say, because, like, most of these are pretty good across the board, except 3. I still don't like 3. The first John Wick, yeah, it's a revenge film, and I'm not really a fan of revenge films, but I did like the style of it. It's kind of like action martial arts, like, it's like, imagine if Bruce Lee carried a gun. That's how Keanu Reeves acts in this movie, and he does a really good job in the role as John Wick. I love him in this. The first one, yeah, it's a revenge film. He's trying to get revenge against these guys who trashed his car and killed his dog. And I'm not a fan of revenge films, but the first John Wick was pretty good. It was one of the better revenge films, I'd say. John Wick 2 was awesome. I really love the plot of that one. I really do, because it has a much more, it has a much more in-depth plot than the first one, because there's a lot of things happening in the second one, and it also keeps you really interested. Again, love the second one. Third one, Parabellum. Man, I did a whole video on it, so I'm not going to talk about it again. Tears of a Son. Kind of a forgotten Bruce Willis war film set in the harsh environment of Africa. And like basically a Navy SEAL who's this cold, stern person trying to rescue this nurse who she won't leave unless her patients come with her. And reluctantly he agrees. But yeah, that's kind of the whole plot of this war-torn Africa. It doesn't have very much action in this one. There's not very much action, so I can understand why somebody wouldn't like this. But give it a fair shot. You might actually find some redeeming qualities about this one. Let's see. Tom Skerritt's in here too. But yeah, not bad. But if you really want to check out a movie that a lot of people missed out on, but I highly encourage you to watch, 1 Hour Photo. This is criminally underrated. If you love Robin Williams as a comedian, if you love Robin Williams' dramatic abilities, I love that too. Great. But have you ever seen him scary before? That's this movie. If you haven't watched this film, it captures a moment in time. We all did this back in the early 2000s where we would have one of those Kodak cameras and we would snap a picture and then we would have to wait, get it developed in a film lab. Some people do that nowadays, like people still do that, but it's not as common as it once was. So this movie perfectly captures that moment in time that we all did it, we all enjoyed it, and wish we can go back to that. But anyway, he's one of those guys, one of those photo developers who seems to have this fascination or this obsession, I should say, with this one family. And we don't really know why up until much, much later in the film. This, it leaves you with a very uncomfortable feeling. It's not even gory at all. It is a very emotionally charged thriller that if you ever want to see Robin Williams scary, then check this out. It is amazing. The Lego Batman movie. I have never been a fan of any of the Lego movies. The first movie had to me anyway, had a very generic plot with a very generic message and an annoying soundtrack. I just couldn't stand everything is awesome. I couldn't stand it anymore. I just was like, oh my god, just stop. The second movie, Lego Movie 2, the second part, had a better plot. At the very least, there was something happening that kind of kept my interest a little bit, but it had a worse soundtrack. I'm like, how do you make a movie that has a slightly better plot, but an even worse soundtrack? Like, how do you do that? And I have not seen Lego Ninjago movie, but I'm pretty sure I'm not going to like it because I have never liked Legos, not even as a kid. I've never been a fan of Legos. Because I just don't like building things, and that's kind of been a problem. But the Lego Batman movie, on the other hand, I surprisingly liked. Yeah, but once again, this goes back to showing a side of Batman that hasn't really been seen much. His comedic side. And he could be funny. The whole plot is that Batman finds out that he adopted his son, but he didn't even realize he even adopted, and that would be Robin. Yeah, this was surprising. This was really surprising. I found myself kind of enjoying it in a very slight way. But again, even though I'm not a fan of these movies, the one thing that has remained consistent was the animation. The animation on all of them are great. I don't know how they did it. I think it was like a combination of stop motion and CG, but nevertheless, it is really good. Yeah, I'm not a fan of Lego movies, but I like that one. Next, Days of Thunder. Yeah, Tony Scott movie, NASCAR movie, but involving the world of NASCAR, which I've never been really big fan of it because I never really found a point to it. Like, I mean, yeah, we have had some really good racers, including Luke Perry, Dale Earnhardt. We've had some good NASCAR drivers over the years, but I just don't like watching it because it's literally just cars going around in circles for 2 hours, you know? I mean, at the very least in baseball and football, there's variety, you know, it's unpredictable. And there are also really good pastimes. But NASCAR, it just is like the same thing over and over and over again. You know, it's like I just never been the biggest fan of it. I don't know. Maybe I haven't had much exposure. Now, Destruction Derby, that's a different story. That also has unpredictability to it. The movie is fine. Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman. This was the first time that they would work together. They would get married sometime later. The other 2 times were Far and Away and Eyes Wide Shut. And it's not a bad movie. It's okay, but I think it's just alright. Phantom Thread. Paul Thomas Anderson, man. I actually just watched his recent film, Licorice Pizza, which was also really good. His movies are relatively consistent in that he doesn't really make movies unless he wants to try and make it good. So he's kind of like a modern-day Stanley Kubrick, if you like. His movies are good. Boogie Nights, There Will Be Blood, Licorice Pizza, Phantom Thread, The Master, which I need to pick up so bad. The movie's plot is very basic, but the plot of his film, Daniel Day-Lewis plays a fashion designer who is married to Leslie Manville, but he gets distracted when a young woman, I'm blanking on her name now, Vicky Creeps. She's a new model, and for this fashion show that Dave Lewis' character is doing, but he starts to turn his attention away from his wife and his art, and essentially has this affair with this woman. And cinematography is great, costume design is amazing, fitting of the 1950s period. And yeah, this is absolutely a really good movie. And if you missed out on it, please do yourself a favor and go watch it, because it's great. Let's talk about an underrated master, Andrea Tartovsky. Solaris. I watched this one day. I didn't know what I was expecting, and I ended up walking away with questions. But Criterion picked it up anyway. The plot of this... The thing about Andrei Tartovsky you need to know before watching any of his films is that Andrei Tartovsky tests your patience. So he would have long shots. And I'm not just talking about long tracking shots or anything like that. I'm talking like shots that go on for an eternity. Scenes that kind of don't go anywhere, but they're slow burn movies, excuse me. They are slow movies. But if you are in the right mood, watch this at least. Or at least, he did other movies called, one of them was called The Mirror, and there was another movie he did, I'm blanking on the name of it now, but a lot of people don't know him today. But if you can only watch one of his films, Solaris is the one. The plot of the film involves an astronaut who is being asked to board the space station because there are these distressing signals going on, and nobody really knows where they're coming from. But he had a wife that died, and he goes up to the spaceship and sees his wife. But is she really there? It basically is a movie that questions love, truth, and humanity, or at least that's what it says on the back of the box. But I didn't know what I was expecting. I thought it's fine. It's a decent film for sure, but not everyone's cup of tea. You might find it really, really boring. But if you're in the right mood for a very abstract kind of movie, if you love 2001: A Space Odyssey, you might like this. Or not. And then up next, Maverick. Yeah, around the 90s, the Western comedy was on their way out. With the critical failure of Wagons East, Western comedy seemed pretty much dead. I mean, to my knowledge, it started with the Laurel and Hardy short Way Out West, and then it evolved into the John Wayne classic McClintock, Cat Ballou, Blazing Saddles. I mean, Seth MacFarlane tried to bring back the Western comedy with A Million Ways to Die in the West, but even that didn't really seem to work. But Maverick is one of the better ones. Of the more current Western comedies, this is the one you want to watch. Mel Gibson, James Garner, and Jodie Foster. This is definitely one of the better Western comedies out there. It has a charm to it, and it works, surprisingly. I think it's about a gambler who is trying to... I think it's about a gambler. Oh my god. Okay, so... Hear me out for a second. Alright, I just found this out just now as I'm recording this. This was based on a TV show. This was based on a TV show from the 60s, and James Garner was the main character in that. He was the original Maverick. And he, even though he doesn't reprise his role in the movie, he was in the original series, and now he's in the movie. I didn't even know it was based on a TV show. I'm serious. I didn't even know. So, up next, The Founder, about the formation of McDonald's. So, this is the true story of Ray Kroc, who bought McDonald's from Dick and Mac McDonald, who they originally created McDonald's in San Bernardino, California. And at that time, they believed in quick service. Why get served in 5 minutes when you could get served in 20 seconds? You know, it was that kind of speedy mentality. In fact, their logo was Speedy. And I'm not kidding, his name was Speedy. I'm not joking. It was literally just a burger head, but had like a sign that said Speedy or whatever. But Ray Kroc, who developed this thing known as the multi-mixer, he was selling it to McDonald's, but he had a much larger idea in mind. He wanted to buy the company. And by buying the company, he essentially took away the rights from the McDonald brothers. And there's this whole story with it. But it's interesting how the movie tackled something that very few people have talked about. So Ray Kroc posed this handshake deal in which both brothers would get about 50% of the company's profits, all based on a handshake. There was no document, there was nothing like that. It was literally just a handshake. And guess what? The movie accurately shows that they never received a dime. You can look up all of this you want, but that's an interesting part of McDonald's history that isn't talked about, that is talked about in this movie. So the reason why is because the McDonald brothers didn't really want to talk about it. Although, in an interview, one of the McDonald brothers, I think this was in the 90s, he said that he got asked the question all the time, do I regret selling the company? And my answer is no. Yeah, but this movie is really good. I highly recommend this one. Up next, we have The Town. This was Ben Affleck's comeback performance. He also directed it. Before this, he directed Gone Baby Gone, which I still haven't seen yet. But this is a pretty decent heist film. It's a pretty decent heist film. Basically, take the opening sequence to The Dark Knight and make it the whole movie. That is literally what this movie is. It's a heist movie, but it's done really, really well. And this was before Ben Affleck would do Argo. So, this is actually one of the cheaper movies you can find. You can find this for literally $1 in some places, which is insane. Sicario. Denis Villeneuve has directed some pretty decent films. This is my personal favorite of his. It is a thriller, but it's a thriller that will leave you wanting more. Basically, Emily Blunt is part of the FBI, and she's involved on this case that I don't want to give too much away, but basically she is asked to pursue a drug lord. And this mission to pursue this drug lord turns everything she knew about the FBI and their missions and how they do their missions, and her whole perception is turned upside down. And so in a way that it's kind of like war films where we show the dehumanizing effects of war, but Roger Deakins' cinematography is beautiful, the music is great, the suspense, the pace of the film is excellent, and I highly encourage anybody to watch this. I'm not going to give too much away, but it is great. Kickboxer with Jean-Claude Van Damme. It's kind of like Rocky if Rocky had a revenge mission, essentially. There's not a whole lot for me to comment on. His brother was involved in this fight. He gets paralyzed, and so his brother, played by Van Damme, wants revenge. But it's not really about revenge. It's more or less just finishing the fight. Or at least that's the mentality that it tries to put out there. Yeah, kind of a not that great film with just not really likable characters. Not very likable characters, but yeah, it's a decent martial arts movie if you look past that, but